pretty frightening. It's not just African Americans. It's white people who would associate or deign to go out with a black man or marry one. You're free in America to love whomever you want. So it infects all of us, doesn't it? This one rotten apple. And yet they cover for him. Yet they cover for him. And so, how do we do it? And what do we do with regard to this man? Well, we call some witnesses. And you recall these witnesses. And before I talk about these witnesses just briefly, and I'm going to conclude my remarks with regard to them, I indicated to you that by the nature of this case, I'm going to pass the baton to Mr. Barry Scheck. You've been great from a standpoint of listening and watching, and I stayed longer than I planned to, but I hope you agree that some of these things were important. And I'll get one more time to conclude with some concluding remarks after Mr. Scheck finishes. The good news is that Mr. Scheck and I will both hopefully finish today and turn it back over to Ms. Clark, so in a day or so you're going to get this case. You have to hear lawyers talk anymore. Be time to hear you talk. Time to hear you speak out. And I'll be happy. I'll relax tonight, knowing that soon it's going to be in your hands. We're real comfortable about that, all of us, and you should know that. So please give Mr. Scheck the attention that you've given me, and understand that all parts of this case are very important, and it all ties together, because it's all of the evidence in this case went through that LAPD and that black hole over there, that cesspool of contamination, and you listen to him about what he has to say in that regard. Mr. Darden said that in a textbook fashion we had impeached Mr. Furman. Well, we thank him for that. We take no pride in that, but that's what did happen. In addition to calling Kathleen Bell where you saw her, and she's not the kind of lady that, looking at her, you probably remember her. Unless, it'd be very interesting. He's lying about not knowing her. But this man used these words and these racial epithets so much, he probably can't remember who he said it to. He said it to everybody, whoever came in contact with him, on tape. Can you imagine the gall about that? That you would have these racist views, and yet you would put it on tape. Thank God he put it on tape. And so Kathleen Bell came in here and told you the same things in those letters. You saw her. You observed her. She told us the truth. They couldn't mess with her because now we had those tapes. And then there was Natalie Singer. Barely knew this man. He was dating her roommate. This man is an indiscriminate racist. He talks so bad that she didn't want him back in the house. What does he say to her? In her presence, the only good nigga is a dead nigga. Now that, probably all heard that expression sometime in your background or somewhere, or heard somebody say that, and that's tremendously offensive. He just says it in the presence of his partner's girlfriend, like they're going to go on a date. I hope that in the homes throughout this country, people aren't acting like this. This happened to come to light, but I'd be pretty frightened if I felt that the majority of people in this country acted like this behind closed doors or whatever, because what you do in the dark is going to come to the light. Remember that. That's what this case is about. It came to the light, and just in time to get it to you. If I felt that the majority of people in this country acted like this behind closed doors or whatever, because what you do in the dark is going to come to the light. Remember that. That's what this case is about. It came to the light, and just in time to get it to you. So you saw her on the stand. You saw her graphically. Talk about that. You doubt in anybody's mind she's telling you the truth? Any one of you think she's not telling you the truth? And then finally we had Roderick Hodge in this series of witnesses. And Roderick Hodge, intelligent young man, understood something about his rights too. Because after this run-in with Furman and his partner, when he's in the back of the police car, Furman turns around and says to him words that I want you to remember in this case. I told you I'd get you, nigger. That's what he tells Robert Hodge. Why is that important? Because from 1985, when he went on that one call involving the Mercedes, that was this man's mindset vis-a-vis O.J. Simpson. I'm going to get that guy. And in 89, when he wrote that report, indelibly impressed on his mind, and in 94, he had his chance. Still in West Los Angeles, he had his chance. So Hodge is important because you can espouse all these epithets and talk theoretically about your racism, but when it's directed toward a human being. And I said to him, Mr. Hodge, tell this jury how that made you feel. He said it made me feel angry and upset and frustrated. It was dehumanizing in a free society. But this man, Furman, does it with impunity. And his partner sat there and heard it and didn't report it. There's something rotten about this kind of conduct. And it's gone on too long. And so, that's why he's important. But the capper was finding those tapes. Something that you could hear. Lest there be any doubt in anybody's mind. Laura McKinney came in here. And I can imagine the frustration of the prosecutors. They've had the glove demonstration. They've seen all these other things go wrong. And now they got to face these tapes. And they didn't know how to handle her. Quite frankly, she was a reluctant witness. You know that. Mr. Darden asked her those questions where he became negative with her. She's very smart. Unlike some others who didn't know how to handle it, she says, why are we having this negative conversation? Why are you acting and treating me like this? I didn't try to stop him about cover-ups and things. Why are you asking me these questions? I'm the one who's here on the subpoena. Why are you treating me like this? Now you know it's true because they've heard the tapes. Why are you messing with this lady? You just get so wrapped up in what you're doing, I guess. Why are they messing with this lady? We owe a debt of gratitude to this lady. That ultimately and finally she came forward. And she tells us that this man, over the time of these interviews, uses the N-word 42 times, is what she says. In the so-called Furman tapes. And you, of course, had an opportunity to listen to this man and espouse this evil, this personification of evil. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Harris to play Exhibit 1368 one more time. There was a transcript. This was not on tape. The tape had been erased. Where he said, "We have no niggers where I grew up." These are 2 of 42, as you recall. And then there was his actual voice.
They don't do anything. They don't initiate contact. Some states would have
Now, you heard that voice. No question whose voice that is. Mr. Darden concedes whose voice that is. They don't do anything. Talking about women. Doesn't like them any better than he likes African Americans. They don't go out and initiate contact with some 6'5" nigger who's been in prison pumping weights. That's how he sees the world. That's this man's cynical view of the world. That's this man who's out there protecting and serving us. That's Mark Furman. And he's paired in this case with Phil Van Adder. They're both beacons that you look at and look to as the messengers that you must look through and pass. They're both people who've shown that they lie, will lie, did lie on the stand under oath. And you know, one little parenthetical thing, how these people all try to stick together from the standpoint of law enforcement. The FBI agent comes in here and he talks about, when I bring out the fact he says that Van Adder says they're not there to save lives on cross-examination, he says, well, He says, I think he was being sarcastic. That Van Atta was being sarcastic. Or maybe it was a joke. But, you know, when I listened to that, I thought about that and I said, what's the joke? What's the sarcasm? Is the Constitution, this man's rights to be safe and secure in his home, is that the joke? Is that the sarcasm? It's a sad state of affairs. That's the lead detective I'm talking about. These two twin devils of deception. And think about them and keep them in mind. Thank you for your attention during this first part of my argument. I hope that during this phase of it, I have demonstrated to you that this really is a case about a rush to judgment, an obsession to win at all costs, a willingness to distort, twist, theorize in any fashion to try to get you to vote guilty in this case where it is not warranted. That these metaphors about an ocean of evidence or a mountain of evidence is little more than a tiny, tiny stream, if at all, that points equally toward innocence. That any mountain has long ago been reduced to little more than a molehill under an avalanche of lies and complexity and conspiracy. This is what we've shown you. And so, as great as America is, we have not yet reached the point where there's equality in rights or equality of opportunity. I started off talking to you a little bit about Frederick Douglass and what he said more than 100 years ago. For there are still the Mark Furmans in this world and in this country who hate and are yet embraced by people in power. But you and I, fighting for freedom and ideals and for justice for all, must continue to fight to expose hate and genocidal racism and these tendencies. We then become the guardians of the Constitution, as I told you yesterday. For if we as the people don't continue to hold a mirror up to the face of America and say, this is what you promised, this is what you delivered, if you don't speak out, if you don't stand up, if you don't do what's right, this kind of conduct will continue on forever. And we'll never have an ideal society, one that lives out the true meaning of the creed of the Constitution, of life, liberty, and justice for all. I'm going to take my seat, but I get one last time to address you, as I said before. This is a case about an innocent man wrongfully accused. You've seen him now for a year and 2 days. You observed him through the good times and the bad times. Soon, it'll be your turn. You have the keys to his future. You have the evidence by which you can acquit this man. You have not only the patience, but the integrity and the courage to do the right thing. We believe you'll do the right thing. And the right thing is to find this man not guilty of both of these charges. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate your attention. I think, Your Honor, we may need a brief break because he has to be...
Exhibits.
Judge.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a 15-minute recess at this time. Remember all my admonitions to you. We'll see you back here in 15 minutes. All right, we'll stand in recess.
Television viewers have seen a ringing and eloquent statement from defense attorney Johnnie Cochran, but there was much going on in the courtroom that the camera did not show. Dan Abrams was inside the courtroom. He's standing by. Dan, tell us about it.
Well, Fred, you'll remember that earlier, about 25 minutes ago, maybe 35 minutes ago, we took a break in the middle of Johnnie Cochran's closing argument. The reason we stopped is because one of the jurors was crying, and she walked out of the courtroom, went into the back, and then came back in. But even after she returned, she was given tissues by the sheriff's deputy. She was consistently wiping her eyes throughout Johnnie Cochran's discussion of Mark Fuhrman. This is an African-American woman, someone who really in the past has not shown much emotion, not someone who generally seems to react to much of the testimony. And so I was certainly surprised when she had to run out of that courtroom. Everyone's eyes focused on Johnnie Cochran's eyes. He had the complete attention of this jury, but he also had the attention of the Goldman family. The Goldmans were furious as they came out of the courtroom, and in fact were expecting them to hold a press conference downstairs at any moment. Fred Goldman was just fuming as we walked out. Something else from inside that courtroom, Fred, is that Detective Tom Lang, as you may have seen on camera, was sitting right next to Johnnie Cochran. I mean, he is literally a foot from Johnnie Cochran as Johnnie Cochran was delivering his closing argument. And this must have been intentional. After Johnnie Cochran attacked his partner yesterday, they are now forcing Johnnie Cochran to effectively say this to Tom Lang's face. And today, Johnnie Cochran went even further, calling Detective Van Adder and Detective Mark Fuhrman the twin evils of deception, and really going after Van Adder in a way that we hadn't heard him go after it, and today he had to do it in front of his partner. The racism in this case is simply unacceptable. We heard Johnnie Cochran at one point say he is entitled to an acquittal.
Dan,
but the Goldmans are
pardon me, Dan Abrams, sorry to interrupt you, but that press conference has started. This is Fred Goldman, the father of Ron Goldman, one of the murder victims.
Nearly 40 minutes out of an hour, we have seen a man who perhaps is the worst kind of racist himself, someone who shoves racism in front of everything, someone who compares a person who speaks racist comments to Hitler, a person who murdered millions of people. This man is the worst kind of human being imaginable. He compares racism of its worst kind in this world to what's going on in this case. He has suggested that racism is the foundation of the police department, of our justice system, and only these jurors are capable of fixing everything that has been going on in history? This man is sick. He is absolutely sick. He walks around for the past days screaming, if you would, in a silent way that his life has been threatened. And who does he choose to walk with? Guards from the Nation of Islam. He's talking about racism, and he talks about hate. Who does he connect himself with? This man is a horror walking around amongst us, and he compares what Mark Fuhrman did to misery from the beginnings of history. This man ought to be ashamed of himself to walk amongst decent human beings. This man is a disgrace to human beings. No. He is one of the most disgusting human beings I have ever had to listen to in my life. He suggests that racism ought to be the most important thing that any one of us ought to listen to in this court, that any one of us in this nation should be listening to. And it's because of racism we should put aside all other thought, all other reason, and set his murdering client free. He's a sick man, and he ought to be put away. He's a disgusting human being.